My fiancé proposed to his ex while we were still engaged, so I sent one message that destroyed their new engagement. I thought that was the end of my story. It turned out to be the beginning of theirs falling apart. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I fly regional passenger jets out of Phoenix. People assume pilots are good at handling turbulence. They're right. At 35,000 feet, I know exactly what to do when alarms sound, weather changes without warning, or passengers panic. No one teaches you what to do when the person you plan to marry calmly tells you that everything you've built together was never enough. Ethan Harding and I had been together for 3 years. We'd been engaged for 8 months. Our wedding was 6 months away, and nearly every major decision had already been made. The venue was booked, the deposits were paid, the invitations were almost ready to print. We'd spent weekends tasting cakes, arguing over flowers, laughing about playlists, and acting like forever was already waiting for us. We lived together in my condo. At least we did until that Tuesday. I'd just returned from a 3-day flight rotation. By the time I unlocked the front door, it was a little after 7. My shoulders ached from dragging luggage through airports. My head buzzed with the familiar exhaustion that followed several consecutive flights. And all I wanted was pizza, a hot shower, and a quiet night beside the man I thought I was going to marry. Instead, I walked into a condo so quiet it immediately felt wrong. Ethan was already home, sitting on the couch with his hands clasped together, staring at the coffee table as if he'd been rehearsing what he was about to say. He glanced up when I came in. "Hey!" The smile he gave me never reached his eyes. A knot tightened in my stomach. He didn't look angry or guilty. He looked like someone who had already made a decision. I set my flight bag by the door. "You okay?" He stood slowly. "We should talk." The tension in his voice confirmed that something was wrong. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe he'd lost his job. Maybe someone in his family was sick. Maybe work had gone sideways. Problems could be solved. People survived hard seasons. I grabbed a bottle of water from the kitchen. "What happened?" He waited until I'd twisted off the cap before answering. "I need to be honest with you." The bottle stopped halfway to my mouth. My mind jumped to illness, debt, or some family emergency. I wasn't prepared for what he said next. "Olivia moved back to Phoenix a few months ago." "I know." He hesitated before continuing. "We started seeing each other again." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "We had lunch once. Then we kept talking. Before I realized it, we were seeing each other." A hollow laugh escaped me. His college girlfriend had lived across the country for years. I knew she'd transferred back to Phoenix, but I'd never imagined she would become part of our lives again. "You've been having an affair?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he quietly said, "I asked her to marry me." For a second, I couldn't process the sentence. "You what?" "I proposed." My mouth opened, but no words came out. "She accepted." The room seemed to close in around me. I kept waiting for the explanation that would somehow make sense of what I'd just heard. It never came. "I should have told you sooner," he said. I stared at him. "You're serious?" It wasn't even a question anymore. He nodded. "I couldn't keep lying." "Lying?" My hand drifted to the engagement ring on my finger. "You're engaged to me." "I know." "Then what exactly are you telling me?" He exhaled. When Olivia transferred to the Phoenix office 4 months earlier, they'd started catching up during lunch breaks. Lunch became coffee after work, coffee turned into dinner, and before long they were back where they'd left off after college. "I guess those feelings never really went away," he admitted. I felt my stomach twist. "So yesterday, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes." "Yes." I looked down at the ring he'd slipped onto my finger 8 months earlier. "You proposed to her while I was still wearing your ring." "I know. And you still came home." "I owed you an explanation." The word almost made me laugh. An explanation. As though there could possibly be one. I looked at the man who had spent 8 months planning our wedding, kissed me goodbye before every flight, and promised we'd grow old together. "When were you planning to tell me?" I wanted to understand what I was feeling first. A disbelieving laugh escaped me. "So, while I was flying across 3 states for work, you were deciding whether to marry your fiancé or your ex?" "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." He held my gaze for a long moment. "When Olivia and I broke up after college, I believed that part of my life was over. I moved on. I built a life with you." He paused. I truly believed I had. "But when she came back, everything I thought I'd buried came back with her." I slowly shook my head. "No. Claire. No. You deserve the truth." "I deserved it 4 months ago." "I didn't know what I wanted, but you do now." "Yes." I swallowed hard. "So what was I?" He hesitated. Only for a second. Long enough. "I think I settled because I believed she'd never come back." The words hollowed me out. For several seconds, I could do nothing but stare at him while the sentence repeated in my head. 3 years together, 8 months engaged, and every plan we'd made had only existed because he believed Olivia would never return. He looked at me as though he expected me to feel sorry for him. "I know I've hurt you." The word felt absurdly small for what he'd done. "I've realized Olivia is the person I'm supposed to be with. I have to follow my heart." The speech sounded practiced, as though he'd repeated it enough times to convince himself it was noble instead of cruel. I drew one slow breath. "Get out." He blinked. "Claire, get out." "I wasn't trying to hurt you." You proposed to another woman before you'd even ended our engagement. I wanted to be honest. No. I met his eyes. You were just late. He stood there for another moment. Then, unbelievably, he said, I hope. Maybe someday we can still be friends. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. He had just destroyed our engagement and was already asking me to make the aftermath easier for him. You should leave. Without another argument, he walked toward the bedroom, packed an overnight bag, gathered a few clothes, his laptop, and some toiletries. Neither of us spoke while he moved through the condo. The silence somehow hurt more than another fight would have. When he reached the front door, he stopped. I really am sorry. I didn't answer. A moment later, the door clicked shut. Only then did my legs give out. I slid to the kitchen floor and sat there staring into space. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. Ethan, I hope one day you'll be happy for me. This doesn't have to become ugly. I read the message twice, locked my phone, and never replied. Surely his parents would tell him he'd lost his mind. Instead, his father sighed. Olivia always meant a lot to him. His mother sounded almost relieved. We always hoped they'd find their way back to each other. I stared at the phone. So, you're saying this is okay? Claire, she said gently. He's following his heart. At least he told you before the wedding. After 4 months of seeing her behind my back and proposing to her while he was still engaged to me, she went quiet. I ended the call before she could find another excuse for him. The condo was still filled with wedding magazines, fabric samples, and color swatches we'd picked out only weeks earlier. Outside, Phoenix carried on like any other evening. Inside, everything I'd spent 3 years building had disappeared in less than half an hour. By midnight, I still hadn't cried. I lay awake replaying one sentence until it barely sounded real. I settled because I thought she was gone. The next week passed in a blur of sleepless nights. The first morning, I reached across the bed before remembering he was gone. By the third day, I stopped reaching. By the seventh, the empty space beside me had become routine. Wednesday afternoon, during a break in simulator training, I called the wedding venue. The coordinator recognized my voice immediately. Claire, we were just about to email you about the menu tasting. I closed my office door. We need to cancel the wedding. A long pause followed. I'm so sorry. She didn't ask why. She probably didn't have to. Because we canceled only 6 months before the ceremony, most of the deposit was gone. $3,000 disappeared in less than a minute. Oddly enough, losing the money barely registered. What hurt was realizing every plan we'd made together. The tasting appointments, seating chart, honeymoon brochures had already become meaningless, while I was still planning a future Ethan had quietly walked away from months earlier. That evening, I noticed our engagement photo still sitting on the bookshelf. Ethan's arm was around my waist. We were both smiling. I wondered how long he'd already been pretending. I packed the photograph with the wedding magazines and venue brochures, sealed the box, and pushed it onto the highest shelf where I wouldn't have to see it. Saturday morning, my younger sister Megan showed up with coffee and far too many pastries. She glanced around the condo, noticed the missing photographs, and quietly asked, "So, it's really over?" I nodded. She sat beside me at the kitchen island without saying anything for a while. Then she sighed. "I still think you should expose him." "Megan, I'm serious. He humiliated you. People should know what he did." I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug. "I don't want revenge." "You really don't?" I shook my head. "I just want to understand how someone can change this much without me seeing it." She reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. "You didn't miss anything, Claire. You trusted someone who lied. Those aren't the same thing." Dad called that evening. Unlike Megan, he wasn't angry. He sounded deeply disappointed in Ethan. Before hanging up, he said something that stayed with me for weeks. If someone can walk away from 3 years that easily, they probably started letting go long before they admitted it. He was right. Tuesday hadn't been the beginning. It was simply the day Ethan finally admitted what had already been happening. Flying made it easier not to think. The cockpit left no room for distractions, and that's exactly what I needed. Every flight demanded complete attention. So for a few hours I could forget my engagement had ended. The quiet afterward was much harder. Whether I was standing in a hotel bathroom before bed or waiting for an elevator before another flight, the same sentence always found me. I settled because I thought she was gone. By Sunday night, I stopped pretending sleep was going to come. Around 2 a.m, I carried my laptop into the living room. I wanted to understand how 3 years of my life had unraveled without me seeing it. I searched Olivia Parker. Her LinkedIn confirmed exactly what Ethan had said. She'd transferred to Phoenix 4 months earlier and worked at the same pharmaceutical company. There was nothing remarkable there. Facebook told a very different story. Her profile was public, and it took only a few minutes to notice that almost every major moment in her life seemed to include her mother. Birthdays, holidays, weekend outings, work celebrations. It didn't matter what the occasion was. Lorraine was always there. That still wasn't strange. What caught my attention were the comments. Lorraine responded to nearly every post, praising Olivia for listening to her, thanking her for asking first, reminding her that she always made the right decisions. It happened so consistently that it stopped feeling affectionate and started feeling controlling. Curious, I kept scrolling. The pattern never changed. Older Facebook posts showed that Olivia lived only a few blocks from her mother. Living nearby meant nothing by itself, but together with everything else, it painted a picture that was difficult to ignore. The next morning, I called Lena, who had known both Ethan and Olivia since college. After a little awkward conversation, I finally asked why they had broken up. Lena didn't answer immediately. When she did, it was only 2 words. Her mother. Lorraine? Lena sighed. She never thought Ethan was good enough. She wanted Olivia with someone from a wealthier, more established family, and she pushed until Olivia gave in. So Olivia ended it? With a text. I blinked. After 3 years? Yep. Did she regret it? For months, she cried all the time. But she still chose her mother's approval over him. After we hung up, I sat quietly, turning it over in my head. 7 years earlier, Olivia had walked away from Ethan because Lorraine disapproved. Now she'd returned to him. But nothing I'd learned suggested Lorraine knew how their reunion had begun. Before we hung up, Lena said one last thing. You know what's really sad? What? I honestly don't think Olivia has ever made a major decision without asking her mother first. Before we ended the call, Lena hesitated. There's one more person you should probably know. Who? Amber. We all went to college together, and she works in Ethan's department now. She knows about your engagement and remembers meeting you at the company holiday party last year. Would she actually talk to me? I think so. A few minutes later, Lena texted me Amber's number. After the call ended, I sat there replaying everything I'd learned. The Facebook comments, the old neighborhood posts showing Olivia lived close to Lorraine, and the family photos all pointed to the same conclusion. Every important decision in Olivia's life seemed to pass through her mother first. For the first time, the pieces began fitting together. Then another question surfaced. If Olivia still relied on her mother that much, did Lorraine even know Ethan had ended his engagement to be with her? Or were they planning to explain it after the fact? For the first time since the breakup, I was thinking about what they had hidden rather than what I had lost. And once that question settled into my mind, I couldn't let it go. If their relationship depended on everyone accepting the same version of events, maybe all it would take to shake, it was making sure the right person knew the truth. Monday morning, I woke up asking myself what I was really trying to accomplish. I could have exposed Ethan publicly, but humiliating him would not restore what he had taken from me. What bothered me was that Lorraine appeared to be judging the relationship without knowing how it had begun. That evening, after another flight, I opened a folder on my laptop and started organizing everything I had. Without thinking about it, I built a timeline. I gathered our engagement photos, wedding contracts, deposit receipts, honeymoon reservations, and the cancellation notice showing the $3,000 we'd lost. Then I added Ethan's messages. The one that stayed with me the longest was painfully simple. I hope one day you'll be happy for me. This doesn't have to become ugly. A few minutes later came another. I never wanted to hurt you. I just couldn't ignore how I felt anymore. I read them several times, struck by how he used gentle language to soften what he'd done. The hardest file to save wasn't one of Ethan's texts. It was Olivia's Instagram story. She'd posted a photo of her hand resting over Ethan's, her new engagement ring clearly visible beneath the caption. Sometimes love finds its way back home. The story disappeared a few hours later. It didn't matter. A mutual friend had forwarded the story before Olivia deleted it, and I saved the screenshot. She'd publicly celebrated becoming engaged to another woman's fiancé. That was all the picture said. It didn't need anything else. By Wednesday evening, the folder was finished. I had arranged everything by date, from our engagement and wedding plans to Olivia's return, Ethan's confession, the canceled wedding, and the messages that followed. I left out my opinions and kept only the documents. Looking at it, I realized it resembled an accident investigation more than the record of a failed relationship. Maybe that was why it felt so familiar. As a pilot, I'd been trained to reconstruct events without emotion, following facts instead of assumptions. Without meaning to, I was doing exactly the same thing now. Thursday afternoon, Hayes asked if I wanted to grab coffee after work. Over the past year, Hayes had become a colleague I trusted deeply. He understood that sometimes the best thing you could offer wasn't advice, but space to think. He noticed the folder still open on my laptop. Building a case? I smiled. Not exactly. He studied me for a moment. You've got an idea. I'm not even sure it's a good one. Try me. So I told him everything. Hayes listened without interrupting as I walked him through everything I'd learned about Olivia, Lorraine, their breakup in college, and the timeline I'd spent days putting together. When I finished, he folded his arms. And I don't think her mother knows. You're sure? I can't prove it, I admitted. But if Lorraine already knew Ethan left his fiancée for Olivia, why would Olivia delete that engagement post only a few hours after putting it up? He thought about it for a moment. Fair point. I watched people pass outside the cafe window. I keep wondering whether contacting her mother makes me vindictive. Instead of answering, Hayes asked, Are you planning to lie? No. Threaten anyone? No. Ask for money? Ruin their lives? I shook my head. I'm just telling someone the truth. He leaned back. Then I don't think that's revenge. That conversation settled something inside me. That evening, I found Lorraine Parker on Facebook without much effort. Her profile was public, filled with family photos, church events, and proud posts about Olivia. Nothing looked unusual. I opened Messenger. For nearly 10 minutes, I wrote, erased, and started over. The first draft sounded angry. The second sounded defensive. The third felt like I was trying to manipulate her. None of them reflected what I actually wanted to say. So I scrapped everything and approached it the same way I'd write an incident report after a flight. Clear, factual, and free of emotion. Mrs. Parker, we don't know each other, but I believe you deserve accurate information before your daughter's relationship moves any further. My name is Claire Bennett. Until last Tuesday, Ethan Harding was my fiancé. We were together for 3 years and engaged for 8 months. Last week, Ethan told me that he had proposed to Olivia before ending our engagement and that she had accepted. I've attached documents showing our engagement, our wedding plans, the timeline of events, and Ethan's own messages confirming everything. I'm not asking you to respond or become involved. I simply believe important decisions should be made with complete information. Thank you for your time. I read it several times. Every sentence was factual. Nothing exaggerated, nothing omitted. My finger rested over the send button longer than I'd expected. Once I pressed it, there would be no taking it back. For a second, I wondered how Ethan would describe what I'd done. Vindictive? Probably. Olivia would almost certainly think so. Then I remembered the words he'd said without hesitation. I settled because I thought she was gone. That was enough. I had no reason to keep protecting their version of events. At 8:03 Friday night, I pressed send. Messenger refreshed. A gray checkmark appeared beneath the message, and that was it. No reply appeared. I left the phone on the counter and reminded myself there was nothing else I needed to do. Whatever happened next no longer belonged to me. I expected to wait several days. Instead, I woke Saturday morning to a reply from Lorraine. It was only 3 sentences. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. This situation is completely unacceptable. I will handle it. I read them twice. There was no anger, no questions, no attempt to defend Olivia. Just a calm response that somehow unsettled me more than pages of accusations would have. Later that afternoon, during a layover, I showed the message to Hayes. He read it once before handing my phone back. That's short. Too short. He nodded. The quiet ones usually worry me the most. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd managed in days. After that, I forced myself to stop thinking about it, at least until Monday. Monday morning, I was preparing for a flight to Denver. The routine was familiar enough to keep my mind occupied, and I buried myself in pre-flight checks until my phone started vibrating. Once, then again, then several more times. By the time boarding began, I had 8 unread messages. They would have to wait. My passengers couldn't. Nearly 2 hours later, after we reached the gate in Denver, I finally checked my phone. The first message was from Lena. Call me now. The second came from Megan. Oh my God. The third was from Amber. Claire, I think you need to know what happened this morning. I called her immediately. She answered before the first ring finished. You are not going to believe this. What happened? She took a breath. Your message reached Lorraine. I know, she replied. No, Amber said. I mean, it really reached her. According to Amber, Lorraine walked into the pharmaceutical company's Phoenix headquarters around 10 that morning, asked reception to call Ethan downstairs, and waited without making a scene. When Ethan stepped into the lobby and saw who was standing there, all the color drained from his face. He looked terrified, Amber said. I've honestly never seen him like that. What did he do? He kept asking why she was there. And Lorraine? Amber gave a quiet laugh. At first, nothing. She just stood there looking at him. Then Lorraine finally spoke. You proposed to another woman while you were still engaged? Lorraine's voice carried across the lobby. Conversation stopped almost instantly. Ethan glanced around, his face tightening with panic. Please, he said quietly. Can we talk somewhere else? No. She didn't lower her voice. You dragged our family into your deception. You embarrassed yourself, and somehow you expected everyone else to clean up your mess. As Amber described it, the entire lobby froze. Receptionists stopped typing. People leaving the elevator slowed down. Even employees walking past pretended to organize paperwork while listening. Ethan reached for Lorraine's arm. She pulled away. Don't. I agreed not to stand in your way when Olivia told me you two were trying again, and this is what you've done? Amber couldn't hear Ethan's reply, only that he was speaking in a low voice, trying to calm her. It wasn't working. Then the elevator doors opened. Olivia stepped into the lobby. She looked confused until she spotted Lorraine. Everything changed. Lorraine? Before she could say another word, Lorraine turned toward her. You. The single word stopped Olivia in her tracks. You told me Ethan was free to be with you. Did he lie to you, or did you never bother to ask? Olivia frowned. What are you talking about? You accepted a proposal from a man who was already engaged. Olivia's expression fell. It wasn't like... Don't. Lorraine cut her off. You expected to build a marriage on deception? Employees exchanged uneasy looks. A receptionist quietly reached for the office phone, but no one seemed sure whether to interrupt. Olivia looked desperately at Ethan. Ethan. He never answered. According to Amber, that was the moment Olivia realized she wasn't in control anymore. The confidence she'd shown since announcing the engagement disappeared. She looked frightened. Lorraine didn't let up. I warned you years ago that relationships built without honesty don't last. Now you've accepted a proposal from a man who hadn't even ended his engagement, and you expect my blessing? We love each other, Olivia said, her voice shaking. No. Lorraine's answer was immediate. If you loved each other, you could have waited until he was actually free. By then, security had arrived. A supervisor politely asked Lorraine to lower her voice. She refused. I have every right to ask why you thought my daughter should build a marriage on this. By now, nearly everyone in the lobby was watching. Several phones had quietly appeared. Amber sighed. I've worked here for 6 years. I've never seen anything like it. Security eventually escorted Lorraine toward the entrance, but she kept speaking as they walked. If either of you thinks this engagement is moving forward, you're mistaken. The doors closed behind her. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then the lobby slowly came back to life, though everyone knew work wasn't what people would be talking about that day. What happened after that? I asked. Amber let out a slow breath. Ethan never went after Olivia. He didn't defend her. He didn't comfort her. He just stood there for almost a minute. Then he turned around, got back in the elevator, and left her standing there by herself. After we hung up, I stood by the airport window, watching planes taxi across the runway, while passengers hurried toward their connections. Everything around me looked completely normal. Hundreds of miles away, though, the future Ethan had chosen over ours had already started coming apart. I expected to feel satisfied. Instead, what I felt most was relief. The truth was finally out, and no one could pretend otherwise. For almost a full day after Amber told me what had happened in the lobby, everything went quiet. Then she called again. You remember how everyone thought Monday was the end? Yeah. It wasn't. After Lorraine left, Ethan shut himself in his office for nearly an hour. Amber saw Olivia knock twice before walking away with her phone in her hand, but she had no idea whether Ethan responded to her messages. Around lunchtime, Olivia confronted him near the elevators. Amber only heard fragments, but several people were close enough to catch the sentence that spread through the office before the end of the day. Lorraine was right, Ethan said quietly. This never should have happened. Olivia stared at him. What are you talking about? I can't do this. Ethan. I'm sorry. I need to end this. The breakup happened without shouting or drama, in a few quiet sentences that ended the engagement he'd destroyed mine to create. It hadn't survived 2 weeks. What happened to Olivia? Amber sighed. She completely fell apart. Co-workers walked her into an empty conference room while human resources cleared the hallway. By then, the entire office already knew why. Within a few days, Ethan requested a transfer. He moved to another department, changed his schedule, even started entering through a different entrance to avoid running into Olivia. By the end of the week, he barely looked like he was sleeping, Amber said. The next morning, Lena texted me. Guess who's blocked Olivia everywhere? I frowned. Who? Ethan. She called before I could reply. Don't get the wrong idea. He's not seeing anyone. He just cut off every way she could reach him. I sat quietly after we hung up. 7 years earlier, Lorraine's disapproval had ended their relationship. Now her disapproval had ended it again. Thursday evening, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. I didn't need to guess who it was. Claire, please answer. I ignored it. Another message arrived. I know you're angry. Then another. Can we talk? I turned the phone over without replying. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. I made a mistake. A week earlier, those words would have broken me. Now they barely made me feel anything. Saturday afternoon, my Ring camera alerted me that someone was outside. It was Ethan. He looked exhausted. His beard was uneven. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he stood with his hands clasped in front of him, visibly nervous. He rang the bell. I ignored it. When he tried again, I answered through the intercom. What do you want? Relief crossed his face. Claire, please, just 5 minutes. No. I know I don't deserve them. You're right. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I leaned against the kitchen counter. 2 weeks ago, he'd been convinced Olivia was the love of his life. Now he was asking me to undo a decision he'd made without me. I wasn't thinking clearly. You seem perfectly clear. He looked down. You told me you settled for me. I know. You proposed to another woman before you'd even ended our engagement. Another nod. I know. There was nothing left for him to argue, and every answer sounded like the same defeated admission. I understand if you hate me. I don't. He blinked. You don't? I don't hate you, I said. I just don't trust you anymore, and I don't want you in my life. His shoulders sagged. I've been miserable. So was I. He looked away and had no answer. After a long silence, he asked, Is there any chance? No. I didn't let him finish. He gave a small nod. I figured. You should go. I just wanted you to know. I already know enough. He stood there another few seconds before turning away. This time he never looked back. That night, he sent one more email asking whether anything could still be repaired. I closed it without answering. Hours later, I opened it again and typed one final reply. Ethan, you didn't lose me. You chose someone else. There's a difference. You asked me to respect your decision because you believed it would make you happier. Now I'm asking you to respect mine. I deserve someone who chooses me the first time, not after someone else walks away. I sincerely hope you learn from this. Please don't contact me again. I sent the reply, blocked the address and the new number, and returned to my evening. 4 weeks later, people had stopped asking whether I was okay and started asking where I was flying next. I was sleeping better, reading before bed, and occasionally going several hours without thinking about Ethan. That was enough to make me smile. Amber still called from time to time whenever office news reached her. Ethan had changed almost every part of his routine to avoid Olivia, including his department, the entrance he used, and the coffee shop he visited before work. Olivia wasn't doing much better. She'd started missing deadlines, showing up late, and disappearing for long stretches during the day. No one talked openly about the lobby confrontation anymore. They didn't need to. Everyone remembered it. A few days later, Lena texted again. Guess who's seeing someone new? I stopped in the grocery store. Who? Ethan. Before I could respond, she called. It's nothing serious. His mother introduced him to someone from church. I laughed quietly. So he moved on already? I don't think he moved on, Lena said. I think someone else picked his direction again. From what Lena had heard, he'd only met the woman twice. Calling it a relationship was probably generous. She was probably right. Whenever life became difficult, Ethan had always waited for someone else to decide what came next. Amber later told me Olivia learned about his new relationship from coworkers. She reportedly locked herself inside a restroom stall for nearly an hour, crying quietly and refusing to come out. By then, hearing about their collapse only made the whole situation feel sad. Meanwhile, my own life kept moving. I repainted the bedroom, donated the dishes we'd registered for, rearranged the furniture, and slowly turned the condo back into my home. The change was small, but one evening after checking into another hotel during a layover, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in weeks, I enjoyed the quiet. One afternoon, Hayes looked across the cockpit and grinned. You're back. What does that mean? You've started telling those awful pilot jokes again. I laughed. I didn't realize I'd stopped. You did. He checked another item on the pre-flight checklist before adding, I missed them. So did I. A few days later, one last email appeared in my inbox. He had created another address after realizing I'd blocked the others, ignoring the boundary I'd already stated twice. The subject line read simply, Please. I should have deleted it unopened, but I read it once. Claire, I know you asked me not to contact you again, and this will be the last time. I've spent the last few weeks thinking. I confused nostalgia with love. I mistook unfinished history for a future, and by the time I understood the difference, I'd already destroyed the best relationship I'd ever had. I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know that I finally understand what I threw away. I finished reading, closed my laptop, and sat quietly for a while. When Ethan first left, that email would have meant everything to me. Now it didn't change anything. I believed he was sorry. But regret doesn't rebuild trust, and some decisions leave damage that an apology simply can't undo. I never replied. Instead, I created a permanent filter so every future email from Ethan would disappear into spam without me ever seeing it. After that, I stopped checking whether he had tried to contact me again. 2 days later, I ran into his father at a grocery store. We recognized each other at the same time. I expected an awkward greeting. Instead, he walked over and quietly said, I'm sorry. For what? He looked down at the shopping cart before answering. We kept telling Ethan to follow whatever made him happy. His voice softened. We never stopped to ask whether he actually knew what happiness looked like. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he gave me a small nod. I hope you're doing well, Claire. You too. Then we went our separate ways. Oddly enough, that brief conversation gave me more closure than every apology Ethan had sent. For weeks after the breakup, I wondered why I hadn't been enough, what Olivia had that I didn't, and how 3 years could disappear so quickly. None of those questions had the answer I was looking for. Ethan's decision said more about his inability to let go of the past than it did about my worth. He had abandoned the life we were building for a relationship he remembered differently than it really was, and it fell apart almost as soon as he got it back. Looking back, I'm grateful it happened before the wedding. Ending an engagement was painful. Ending a marriage would have been far worse. I sold the engagement ring. Another couple booked our wedding venue. The honeymoon became a solo trip through northern Arizona during one of my vacation weeks. None of it was what I'd planned, but the trip gave me room to breathe again. People still ask whether I regret sending that message to Lorraine. I don't. Everything I told her was true. I never lied, exaggerated, or asked her to take my side. I simply refused to keep protecting secrets that had already cost me my future. Ethan, Olivia, and Lorraine were responsible for their choices. I was responsible for what I did next. I no longer measured my worth by Ethan's judgment or built my life around his indecision. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was accepting that the relationship had never meant the same thing to both of us. Once I understood that, leaving it behind no longer felt like a loss. It felt necessary.